my name is Robin, and I'm a volunteer at A Brighter Way.
And I'm Adam, the Executive Director of A Brighter Way.
And welcome to Conversations About A Brighter Way, where we talk about what it's like for those individuals who've had experience with the criminal justice system.
Call it home, people don't answer, people don't support. They support you when you're there, but when you're gone, they forget about who you was, like you vanished.
Family members, friends, mentors, mentees, mental health professionals, and employees all play vital roles aiding formerly incarcerated people transitioning back into society.
For me, it's turning off the fix-it mode. Patience is really important, and sometimes that's just sitting with somebody, hearing those things that are painful over and over and over again.
The advice I give to any job applicant is to be yourself. I want to get to know you, and I want to hire you and whoever you are. And whatever experiences you've had in the past, you might be able to bring a diverse perspective to our business.
The tagline at A Brighter Way is re-entry through relationships. And in season 2 of our podcast, we delve into those relationships which play a pivotal role in the re-entry process.
Essentially, what we're looking at when you come out of prison is your support group, people, places, and things. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. So if you go back to those same people, that same environment, and doing those same things, you are going to be getting the same outcomes.
Speaking of A Brighter Way, the best way to describe it is A Brighter Way's cornerstone project is a mentoring program. It's also kind of like a navigation system. Somebody who's already been through the parole process helps somebody else to see their way through the parole process. Not assuming that they know all the things, but they've faced some of the things that the person coming home is going to face. So we do that in conjunction with, I hate this term, but there's no better term for it, individualized wraparound services. And what that means, you don't know what these services are going to be and what is going to be needed until you meet the person. And that's the cornerstone of our strength-based side-by-side model too, is we don't assume that we know what people need, because each person needs something different. And once you've been incarcerated for a number of years, one of the things that many people forget is what you want is an important part of your needs. So we want to find out what the person thinks they need to work on, and then we work on those and take it from there. Essentially, A Brighter Way is a community of people who've had similar experiences in some way, shape, or form, helping one another, and hopefully the next generation does the same thing.
Let's get on to our episode. In this week, we will be speaking to family members about their experiences with their loved ones in the justice system. I want to take this moment to thank each of you for sharing this space with us, so thank you. So, may I have your name and your experience with someone incarcerated?
My name is Cloutia Ramsey. I have experienced my son being incarcerated for 16 years.
Goodness. And you?
I'm Katie Parr, and my first experience was with my cousin being incarcerated, and then through that I met my current husband, Adam.
Yes, this Adam.
And he is very proud. So what was it like for your son being incarcerated and you kind of waiting for him to get out?
Whew. It was rough. I would say the first 6 months, I was not able to sleep. I paced the floor, I cried, I screamed, I hollered, I questioned God, couldn't sleep 1 hour, back walk, sleep an hour, back walk. The pain just got so unbearable that I had to pray for God to give me acceptance. That was the hardest part, is processing to get acceptance that he actually would be gone for 16 years.
Could you even fathom what 16 years looked like? My personal experience is that in 1993, I looked at a pink sheet that they passed to me in quarantine, and my out date was 22 years into the next century. And I could not even fathom what that looked like. I can only imagine what it would be like to be a mother and have that 16 years. Seems like forever.
Absolutely. And I refused to think of the numbers. I told my son not to get a calendar. Do not start checking off days. Just go from 1 month to the next. And we won't worry about what year it is. And that's how I got through. I did not, after he was processed, of course, he told me what his first out date was and how old he would be. And then I forgot, because for me, it was better for me to accept and have patience to realize it was just incredible amount of time. I could not even think about how long he was actually going to be gone. I had to just take one day at a time.
What about you, Katie? Because like you said, you had a cousin and then you met me. So what was your experience of loving somebody who was incarcerated?
I mean, similar, I have to agree. It was traumatic. My cousin got sentenced to 5 years, but I think largely due to naivety, I wasn't sure if he would survive it, whether suicidal or being killed. I never knew anybody that had been incarcerated before, and that was a place where bad people and monsters are. And I knew no matter what my cousin did, he wasn't a monster. So what you come to learn, I mean, and there's, I think, phases you go through, but in the beginning, it's trauma. What you learn over time is there are all kinds of people in there in all walks of life.
And how did you start to learn some of those things? How did you start to learn that it wasn't just bad people, that it wasn't just a place, where the boogeyman resided, other than the fact that your cousin was there now? What were some of the things that you got exposed to?
Well, first was I saw such a change in his letters when he started going to these classes. He had finished his time in quarantine and had been transferred to another facility where Adam was. And I watched his letters go from gloom and doom and suicidal to, literally to, I think I can do this. And my whole family just kind of let out a sigh. Like, it was so directly linked to the classes that he started taking.
Do you remember what classes?
I think it was the wholeness ethics class. Troy Chapman was teaching his class there. Really impressive person and book for it and material. And my cousin would talk about each class and this guy Troy and this guy Adam and how cool they were, and basically kind of let us know not everybody is a monster, not everybody's a bad person. He also started sharing with us that he would catch Adam outside of classes sometimes too, and Adam was a comfort to him and kind of was helping him to some degree know the ropes and how to get along in there and stuff.
Yeah, Dan came to a lot of the classes. So this is kind of the reciprocity, the idea of things, that you put out kind of coming back to you is I worked with him a lot in different classes, but I would catch him out on the yard and we'd sit down on a bench and chop it up about certain things and, taking responsibility for the actions that you've done and how are you going to respond to that now, and you can't take certain things back, and just having these real conversations. And ultimately, he kept writing these letters to Katie and her family because the whole family had rallied around him because they didn't think that he was going to survive. And so everybody was there doing everything that they could to support him. So as those letters changed, matter of fact, Dan didn't know me as Adam. He knew me as Taz. So it was Troy this and Taz that.
And why were you Taz?
I'm not going to get into that.
Okay.
Let's just say that I wasn't the same person that I am today. I'm a much calmer and more measured individual than I was back then. But anyway, the reciprocity of that was that it started to come back to me because Dan was telling this to his family, and all of a sudden his family started reaching out to me, starting with Katie.
His mom was first.
I'm not sure. You guys were kind of close. Maybe it was Carolyn first. But anyway, Katie wrote me, but Katie did such a good job of explaining the impact that I'd had on the entire family. So when you are a pebble, so to speak, and you're being thrown into a pond, you understand the concept of ripples, but you sink to the bottom often and never actually see the ripples. Well, I saw the ripples because they go to the outside of the container and then the ripples come back. You just don't always see them. And so Katie explained to me the impact that had on the entire family. And I knew that I was having an impact on the people I was working with. I didn't realize that that impact was reaching beyond the fences. So it really had a strong impact. So I wrote her a letter back. We had no intentions of actually writing.
So how long was Katie's letter?
I think this was one of the shortest ones she ever wrote me. I think it was only 3 pages. I'm pretty sure it was 3 pages.
Do you still have it?
I might have the first one, but we got rid of a lot of them because we had like thousands of pages of letters.
That's very sweet.
She had told me the impact that I was having on the family, and I had to write her back to let her know, because I realized how important it was for people to know the impact they have on your lives at that moment. And I needed her to know that even though I was on the path to getting my life together, that she had put another solid piece into that foundation, because I understood things on another level. But I digress. I'll hand it over to Robin.
So what was it like when they were released, when your son was released?
Like 50 pounds of weight lifted off my shoulders. I actually felt like I was breathing air for the first time. I had an overwhelming sense of, wow, now I can protect him again.
That's beautiful.
I was there.
Oh yeah, you picked him up and dropped him off.
I was there and I watched it. And so I talked to Cloutia as well, and because there were moments that Laquan would go into the store or something, with his sister, and so I took those opportunities to kind of talk to her, because we forget sometimes. I used to tell Katie this all the time. Families do a bit too. The difference is the fence. I mean, we've got a smaller yard than you guys do, but the fence still keeps us from one another, and that's ultimately what it's about. So it wasn't just Q coming home. It was her receiving him. And she knew she could take care of him. You could tell, you could see the mother bear thing going on. Matter of fact, I think that was one of the things that we talked about is you got to let him do some of these things,
Yeah. Adam coached me, basically, to remind me that he is a man and he needs to be able to make his own decisions and feel like he's in charge of what he wants to do with his life. And that helped me humble myself to allow that. And in that space, we went out to eat. Originally, after just sitting and talking, me realizing how much weight he had gained, the fact that he had a beard. When he had left home, he was thin. He did not have a beard. And I guess just right in front of me, as opposed to talking to him on the phone, I could actually see and hear the growth from 25 years old to 40 when he came home. Yeah, when he came home, he was 41. And the mother instinct, like I said, now I can protect him. Yeah, and realizing, well, he's 41 years old now.
Right. I think one of the things that you've kind of realized that you didn't realize at that moment, too, is now he gets to protect you, too.
Yeah, I did not realize that at all.
Which is important for him. I mean, he also gets to make Mama proud. And I think that means a lot to him sometimes. We forget that. That sometimes the greatest gift we can give to somebody is for them to be able to care for us.
Okay.
For them to be able to be there for us and to be able to do some things on their own.
Right.
Not all things on their own. I don't let him do everything on his own. He's my brother. There's some things that, I'm going to help you and deal with it. But I also think it's a little bit different sometimes coming from a brother than it is coming from a mother, because we want to make you guys proud. We've spent our entire lives looking up to you and wanting to make you proud. When we do something like that where there's a stain, on that, it weighs on us.
Okay.
So when we come home, we're like, I'm going to make Mom proud now. So before we go to Katie's experience of this, I want to hear you talk about, are you proud of him? And what are some of the things that's made you as proud as you are? Because I already know some of the answers. But.
I am very proud of him. I had started sending him affirmations, flyers before he came home, so that if he had not dealt with the guilt and the fear, that he had some tools to use to deal with that guilt and fear. He had internalized those things, and through the program and that he was working on while he was in prison, I was able to see that that was not going to detour him. And happy to see that, because fear and guilt can hinder our progress.
Absolutely.
Fear and guilt would have caused him to be paralyzed. And so it was a godsend, the relationship him and Adam built while he was incarcerated and afterwards, so that he had a foundation with the foundation that Adam is in charge of, to give him some guidance and to keep him from falling into that little cubbyhole where, okay, I've ruined my life. I've been gone for 16 years. I have no clue what to do, how to do it. Adam kept him from having to go through that. And I am so very proud that he found his niche in helping other returning prisoners to society. And I can see that it has truly built his spirit up, built his self-esteem up. I have a transition home for women. And I had, of course, when maintenance problems come up, I had a maintenance guy to take care of it. And he would say, Mommy, please do not call your maintenance guy. Tell me, let me do it. Oh. If I can't do it, then I'll tell you. But please don't pay another maintenance guy for anything. And oh my God, he went over there and he did a inspection of the house, and something that I didn't know needed to be repaired. He brought to my attention and said that he would do it. And he did. And I am like, oh my God, I got my son is home and he can do this.
Yes.
Beaming with pride and gratitude.
Right.
Well, I'm beaming with gratitude too, because our relationship was one that kind of, I see him as kind of, I might be older than him. I might have come to some understandings and realizations before him, but it's kind of one of those situations that we chopped it up on a regular. We would sit down and have hours of conversation, and we'd make each other defend how we thought about something, our view of the world, things like that. And sometimes you'd come back the next day and you'd be like, man, I thought about what you were saying the other day, and maybe what I was defending wasn't as defensible. And I think that's one of the things that I appreciate, is that he's become so open and willing to look at these things. And so as a member of A Brighter Way, we value him, and he's helping to build a brighter way for others. So he's an integral part of the team. So I want to move this over to my wife so she can tell the amazing story of,
nice.
My release, which is funny. And if she forgets a certain part, I might throw it in there because I think it's an integral part. So and if you want to go a little bit pre-release, because we had an interesting situation, you can start wherever you want to.
Well, dynamics are really different, because I was curious how we would be the same and how we would be different, you and I, because mother, son, and then cousin and fiance. So I'd been with Adam for 11 years, 11 and a half.
Yeah.
We clicked in every way. I didn't see any signs that there would be trouble being compatible when he got out. But there's all these what ifs. Up until this point, it's hypothetical. How are we going to work together out here? And I didn't see anything to be concerned about, but I kept thinking, what don't we know and what can't we see from right now? Actually, it ended up being seamless, incredibly seamless. I don't know how common that is. I kept thinking the odds must be against this working, because it happens all the time. People get involved, and whether through incarceration or not, but especially incarceration situations. How often does it end up working? Maybe it's more successful than I think.
I think ours was a little bit atypical in the sense, too, that, one, the degree to which we both needed communication. When I said a 3-page letter was the shortest letter she ever wrote me, we had periods. I sent a 53-page letter to her that was typed in 15 pitch, so that I could fit as many words on a page as I possibly get. Absolutely single spaced.
Did it all make sense?
Did it make sense?
Yeah, but if you think about it, that was all we had to get to know each other.
Exactly.
We didn't even have phone calls. Was it for the first 3 or 6 months?
6.
I had to get on your approved phone call list.
Yeah.
So that was what we had at our disposal, getting to know each other.
Did he give you butterflies in the beginning? Do you remember?
Yeah, kind of. I guess. Yeah, it was like, this is somebody really special. I very quickly felt like this is something really special and different. I don't think I would have done this otherwise. And it was scary. And I was also afraid of my own perceptions. I would ask family and friends to be another set of eyes and ears for me. This is an incarcerated person. They could pull a good con, probably. Mm-hmm. It was a lot of, and I know that love can be blind. Why would I be any different than anybody else in love?
I hear what you're saying.
But I kept thinking, this is really a special person. And I have to know if this is what I think it is, if this is as good as I think it is. I just thought I need to proceed. Actually, I have a funny picture in my head of what it was like, my brain and my heart. You ever see a large breed of a dog on a leash that isn't trained and they're pulling their owner along?
Yeah.
That was your heart?
Yeah, and my brain's going, wait a minute. But the heart wants what it wants, Oh. I think I was pretty smart about it. And actually, Adam played a big part in that because I told him, that I had concerns. What if this is a big con? And he said, don't try to quiet those feelings or push them away. This is a weird situation, and those feelings are there to protect you, and you will know in time. He said, I trust you will know in time. And I thought, wow, that was awesome. And then later on, I'm thinking, that's what a really good con artist would say.
You kept questioning it every time.
Right.
But yeah, I see human nature. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, butterflies and all.
Yeah.
But as far as when he first got out, I think, isn't there I felt a lot like what you did. I think it was pretty surreal. On the one hand, they're tangible and they're right there in front of you and you can hug them and you don't have somebody saying that you hugged too long or not to put you're holding hands wrong or whatever.
Let me also set the table too, because a lot of times these things kind of, when we're describing them, they get romanticized. Let me describe the first few minutes and then maybe the first hour of my release. First off, I was supposed to be released 2 years earlier. So she also had to go through this disappointment of being released the first time and then a fight. But I also shielded her from the fight because one of the things, that's why I said it was a little bit atypical, is because I let her in on everything that had to do with me. Prison didn't have anything to do with me. It was the environment that I was in the moment. And so I didn't really talk a lot about prison except for the classes and things like that. When there'd be something going on, she had enough to worry about. She was in love with somebody who was incarcerated. She was being punished simply because of who she loved. The last thing that I wanted to tell her was when there was beef on the compound, when there were, things that she couldn't do anything about anyway. So all of those things resolved themselves, and my release actually worked itself out really quick. We thought it was going to take several months. It took about 2.5. So here we go. We get to the door, okay, and I've got my paperwork that I'm bringing with me, and you leave a bunch of stuff behind. So I left my clothes behind and everything like that. But I'm pretty loaded down because I'm programs oriented. I'm bringing programs to the world. I ain't thinking about Google. I don't know what Google is. I'm afraid to leave any of this paperwork behind. So I got all this stuff. So I'm walking out the doors.
Well, the doors slide open.
Loaded down. So I come out the doors and I've got all this, and I give her a hug and I'm crying profusely.
Smiling and crying.
And very shortly after she gives me a hug and a kiss, she says, I need to use the bathroom. And so she leaves me crying in this room of all these other people who are waiting on their loved ones.
For visits, though, were they waiting for
I think
releases?
they were waiting for releases because we were the first ones. And so here I am as she's using the bathroom, telling all these people what an amazing day this was and to cherish it for them. So I was still speaking to other people and trying to comfort other people as I'm blowing snot bubbles, crying so, profusely. Because this is after 27 years. And then we won't even go to what happened. The nice present I left behind somebody's brand new car in a parking lot on the way home because I hadn't been in a car for a while.
You hadn't had McDonald's in.
Yes, motion sickness is a real thing. So my first day was a little queasy too. So.
But I bet that was just heaven for you to have him. Well, surreal heaven to have him. And I liked what you said about romanticizing, because you can romanticize. Like, how romantic, 53-page letter. No, that's not romantic. That's what you had. Mm-hmm. That's what you used.
Kind of desperate.
Yeah.
It was intense.
It was fun and exciting and intense, for sure.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like crazy love in slow motion almost.
Yeah,
writing.
because the writing and that being the only tool that you had to get into each other's head and understand your thinking, morals, values.
Yeah.
The writing made it so intimate.
Yeah, I almost think there's an intensity to that.
The intimacy through writing created the friendship.
Yeah.
And the friendship blossomed into a romantic friendship.
Yeah, very much. Well said.
And then on top of it, when we did start getting visits, because the phone calls were nice, but the phone calls are 15 minutes.
Right.
And even if you can back them back to back, it's still that isn't that much. But like when we first started talking and when we first started to, kind of go down this road, I was clear up in Kenross. So she would drive up to Kenross to see me. And the visiting hours there on the weekends, there was a 12-hour visit. So she would come up and do like three different days. So we'd have like a 6-hour visit, a 12-hour visit, and then a 6-hour visit after it. And I remember even coming back in and, this is people who have been on visits and stuff. So they understand it. And they would be like, what do you talk about for 12 hours? And we talk about everything. And I mean everything. And a lot of people don't do that. So that's the other thing, too, is a lot of people don't do that and don't feel comfortable with that. This is how we were wired, and this is what we needed. And we realized that. I didn't realize what I needed until she found me.
Right.
When she found me, it was like these things would happen, and I'd be like, whoa, no wonder nothing else worked out because it didn't have this, and it didn't empower me, to be the best version of myself. And even to allay some of her fears and just to give her that opportunity to kind of be with her feelings. We didn't get married for about 1.5 years after I got home.
Okay.
Because I wanted to give her that opportunity. I used to joke about it. You got 18 months to run, and once that time was up, ain't no running now. I got papers on you. She's got them on me too, but I never planned on running anyway. So
I want to back up to something I really related to what you said about like 1,000 pounds lifted off you.
Oh, okay.
I wanted him to be out so bad because I wanted so much for him just to sit in a comfortable chair in a recliner in the living room and watch TV. I mean, the littlest things you want for them. And along the way, through these 11 and a half years, I had plenty of times where I'm aware of the stress it is to live with someone loving somebody incarcerated.
Yeah.
And I mean, it is an ordeal.
Yes, it is.
And it's heavy. And it's frightening, and it's heartbreaking. It's all of those things. But I still have to say, even though as hard as it was, I got kind of surprised by, I wanted so bad for you to be out for you. I forgot that I was going to feel a lot better too.
Okay.
And it was like such a weight.
Yeah.
And I think to some degree, you get somewhat accustomed to the heaviness that you're carrying and you forget. And then, wow, and they're out. And it's like, wow.
Yeah, that's why I've had so many aha moments kind of reminding me, oh yeah, he's home. He's no longer in prison. He's home. And so I don't have to wait until he calls me. I can call.
Yes. Yeah.
Anytime.
Those little things, make such a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
there's a gravity. I talk about gravity all the time because there's a gravity to it that we don't even understand. When you're walking around, I mean, we're walking around on Earth's gravity right now. Mm-hmm. We have 1G, which means I weigh 200 pounds. Mm-hmm. On the moon, I would weigh 60. The gravity is different. If I was to go closer to the sun, if I was on Mars or Venus or something like that, I would weigh 500, 600, 700 pounds. And I think prison creates its own gravity. So we're pulling 2 or 3 G's and we don't even realize that you walk around with that level of gravity because this is what your life entails.
And there's a lot of people you don't share it with. You share it with a select few.
Yes. It's also why some people float away when they come home.
Oh, I can imagine that. I can.
Because you're so used to having this weight and this structure and everything holding you in place, and you haven't prepared for all of a sudden some of that weight being taken off your shoulders. So you just kind of fly away. And it was interesting because Katie sent pictures in to some of my friends who were still in there. And one of them was me sitting out on the balcony with my feet kicked up, and I got ice water in my hand and flip-flops on, and just kind of looking off into the distance. We're on a 3rd floor at the time, so I'm just looking off into space, which is something you cannot do while you're in prison. And she sent a picture to one of my friends and said, I thought you'd enjoy this picture, seeing a picture of the free Adam. And he wrote back like the same day and said, Adam don't look any different to me. He must have been free before he left.
Wow, that's powerful.
And so when we talk about these relationships, when we talk about sending in the affirmations, when we start talking about not counting these days and having some kind of finish line for this thing, this is a process. This is a growth. So good reentry, good reintegration back into society starts before they're ever near coming home. So this broken model that we have right now that only starts to work on them in the last 2 years is what's failing us. And it's a terrible use of our funds. We spend so much for it. We need to empower these family relationships. We need to empower the ability for people to be looking at themselves a little bit more deeply and not having to do so. There were periods of time, you had your son in there for 16, you had me in there for 11 plus. There were times that it was $7-8 for a phone call. How many of those can you do?
Oh, yeah.
Or
I
having-
remember that.
Yeah.
And driving out of town for visits. It's
Yeah. And I didn't want to have him feel guilty about calling. When the phone calls were 7 and 8, I think it was $6. For me, it was $6. And I had AT&T who allowed me his collect costs to be billed to come on my phone bill every month. During the course of the years, with the change of a computer age, economics, big business, the program that AT&T was offering was no longer available at the prison.
Yeah. My grandma had to buy a whole new phone system when I went to St. Louis because it was the first place. Seriously, these are things that people don't even think about.
That's right.
She had a rotary phone, and when they took the operators away, she could not accept a phone call. She had to have her phone changed and a line changed because the rotary line, even if you pushed the buttons, it would be like tick, 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 tick. It would tick off the number that it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
Those are the expenses that we don't even think about.
That you don't think about. And after he was not able to call and charge it automatically to my phone bill, then I had to pay. I had to take time, first of all, to call this new company that was handling the phone calls, and I think they were handling the email at that time. No, the money at that time too. And basically set up a separate account and pay money to put on his books for him to be able to call.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have resentments about that for a while.
Rightfully so. Rightfully so. And they also created that situation where it was actually cheaper by 2 cents for us to pay for the calls from inside than it was for our family members to do it from the outside. It went to 15 cents a minute if we bought them from inside, and it was 17 cents a minute for our family. So these relationships are kind of, there are other people involved in your relationship. The mail.
Yeah.
She would send me letters knowing sometimes and not thinking about it at others that somebody else was going to have to read this. Our phone calls. She would talk about things and say flag words and not even think about it. She would be talking about just, escaping, and as far as, just getting out of your own head or something. Right, I'd be like, oh, well, but that's not exactly what she meant. She was talking about, because I knew it would flag the phone conversation. We'd be sitting out there and you could watch an officer trying to read your lips.
Wow.
While you're doing a visit, trying to figure out what you're talking about. And like she said, making sure your hand placement was proper. So the relationship that we have with our loved ones is influenced and impacted by people that don't know us and don't necessarily care about us. I didn't know when I came home. I was concerned when I came home that I had been institutionalized in some ways, because like my natural inclination, we'll be sitting there and I like to hold her hand. I like to touch her. I like to put my hand on her knee, things like those. Were all things you could not do.
Right.
In the visits. And I was wondering if I'd be okay with that. I was wondering if I would flinch when she would touch me certain ways because she couldn't do it before. But like she said, it was kind of seamless because I mean, when you find your person, you know, all that other stuff kind of goes away. And even though I'm grateful, I spent so many years in there, I can't help but look at the difference now compared to then, when it gives me a level of gratitude. But I have less of those I'm home moments than she does. She'll just be looking at me out of nowhere.
You do have less. Well, that I'm aware of. At least I verbalize mine more.
Yeah.
We're just watching TV and I look over and pat his arm and I'm like, you're home a lot.
Yeah.
You spoke to that similar thing.
Yeah.
You've done that too?
Yeah. Just look at him. Watch him sleep.
Or walking through the grocery store.
Yeah.
I'm like, we used to talk about, man, someday it's just going to be the coolest thing to just walk through Meijer together, picking out groceries.
Yeah, and COVID robbed us of that in the beginning, too, because I was going through those stores by myself for a while, trying to protect. That was one of my ways of protecting her. I'll go do the grocery shopping.
Family man.
Exactly. But now it is. We have those moments where it's just like you just kind of look at each other and you're like, this is it. It was the basic, stuff of life that people take for granted.
Right.
People take for granted.
So let's pivot to offering advice for those people that are in the same situation as you are in, that has a son incarcerated or has someone that you love who's incarcerated. What advice would you give them?
Advice when they come home?
Any advice, like while they're in, when they come home?
I guess while they're in, advice to do a personal inventory. The role you played in what you did and why you're there. That way you can let go of some of the fear and the guilt and the anger to be able to accept the circumstances and go through it. I think that is the biggest support that someone needs. Don't bludgeon them with, how could you do this? Why did you do this? How could you do this? Don't bludgeon them with those kind of questions. Just bludgeon them with the fact that now that you've done what you did, you got to get acceptance and move on.
Let me back that up too. What advice would you give to a mother for her own self-care? Because I know that it often turns to the loved one. But like, what would you just say to somebody who's in your exact position about how do you balance that love that you have for somebody else and wanting to care for them and wanting them to come out the other side, the best version of themselves? How do they stay healthy? Because you got healthier while your son was gone too. You did some work too.
Oh yeah. Basically, the parent, being a parent, you have to get acceptance. That for me, it was, how did my son do this, commit this crime? No, my son did not do this. And at first, I wouldn't even talk to him. I realized that I didn't want to go visit him because he was in prison. And so I had to do some self-inventory to get acceptance that, yeah, your son did. And your son got the punishment he should have got. And you need to be grateful he didn't get life without parole. Be grateful that he doesn't have to do all that time thinking about he took somebody's life, because that could have very well been the result of the crime he committed. So for me, it was to get acceptance, just like I encouraged him to. For me to get acceptance so that I could be at peace with the fact he did what he did. Even though, no, not my son was on my mind for probably over a year. Yeah, how could he? But he did. And so for me to get a peace of mind about the amount of time he had to do, not question. I know people that have done the same crime, they didn't get that much time. So that I didn't dwell on that, I had to go inside me and I guess improve my spirituality.
Did you talk to God a lot?
Yes. My personal relationship with God increased tremendously because he is all I had to stay sane. My main thinking was, he is going to go crazy in there. So I had to talk to God a lot to just keep my son clothed in his right mind keep him safe from hurt, harm, and danger, and to accept his fate. And by the same token, I guess my spirituality was increased because my relationship with the Lord increased because I had to talk to him so much more than I was prior to Laquan going to prison.
Let me add something to that, to parents in that situation, because we talk a lot of times we talk to each other. The formerly incarcerated talk to people who are incarcerated and who are formerly incarcerated. And we talk a lot about you're not the worst thing that you've ever done. I'm not the worst thing that I've ever done. And I think sometimes parents need to realize you're not the worst thing your child's ever done either. Because we feel like we failed that. I remember I had a really strong moment with my dad that was God. It was God at work. Because my dad came up 2 weeks before he passed away, suddenly.
Katie, can you take over for him?
Yeah.
Yeah, his dad passed away really unexpectedly in his sleep one night. But he had been up there 2 weeks before. And ironically, probably not ironically, maybe some divine stuff going on there. He actually had told Adam that he was proud of him. And, they wrestled. You do a lot of wrestling and a lot of internal work trying to deal with this stuff, to be the relative and to try to be understanding and empathetic of the person who's incarcerated. That was really beautiful, and it meant everything because they had their issues.
Yeah. And he tried, and he held himself to a standard. He felt responsible for it, and he wasn't responsible for it. Ultimately, I was responsible for it. But that's the other thing about relationship is that we all play a role in it, but we don't know what our role is meant to be.
But I also think to what Cloutia was saying, I think about just as being people, it's so easy to judge. It's just the easiest thing for all of us is to judge. Understanding takes a lot more effort, and you have to even want to. So if it's not a loved one, who even cares to understand? But I think, we like things to fit in their nice, neat compartments, and we want things to make sense, and we want to label things good and bad, and we're not comfortable with ambiguity. And truth is, we are people, and we do things we shouldn't sometimes, and we hurt people sometimes, and we can be beautiful and horrible in the same lifetime. But you asked about advice. I think like you two were new into the system. You and Laquan, you were in the system too. You and me were too, even though we weren't in it. But there's so much to navigate, like learning about visits. How do you do visits? How do you do phone calls? What are the rules about mail? Adam helped me a lot with Dan, his situation, just because he'd been, he did 27 years and I only did the last 11 with him. And so he was able to fill in a lot of informative stuff, and he helped a lot, emotionally too. There's a lot, I think too, as the family members out here, there's a lot of lessons in tolerating powerlessness and helplessness. That's rough. I think advice for other people, support groups. There's online support groups I didn't know about. Talking to people in the waiting room when you visit can be helpful, and you can learn things from each other about how to navigate some of these things. And even visits at every single facility we went to are a little bit different. The rules are mostly the same, but guards tolerate different things. And guards are people too. They bring their wounds to work with them too.
And some of the guards think that they're supposed to be the judge and jury and the disciplinary.
Yeah. And then there's some
people's biases and morals and values play a big role in how they treat the prisoners and how they treat the
visitors. Yeah. I think anybody who's visited somebody in prison has probably been dealt with varying degrees of mistreatment.
Yes.
But there are also those officers, they got a hard job to do, and you've got some that really know how to walk that line and not be
an asshole.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. And you've got some that really know how to do that well. They're people too, I guess, but a lot of unpleasantness. I encountered a fair amount of unpleasantness with a lot of the staff.
There is, but I would also say this idea too, that Those things sometimes become important, but it's not that they needed to be. I'm not one of those people that believe that things happen for a reason in the sense that they were meant to necessarily happen that way. But I do believe we're never placed in a situation that we can't handle and that we can't benefit from. And I think that's hugely important because everybody that is having this conversation understands from proximity to the things that they've been put up against, how much worse things can be, how difficult. You have a level of gratitude if you allow yourself to have it. You guys have gone through some stuff, from simply loving who you love, who is incarcerated and has to deal with the parole process and all of those things. You understand those things, and you could have turned it into something where you internalize it and you just hate it, or you just really got totally disgusted with the system, or gave up on God. There are all these different ways. There's off ramps for all these ways. So when these things happen, it's not so much they happen for a reason. They happen, and it's for us to turn them into a reason. I say you need to turn pain into purpose. I can suffer through anything if I know there's a reason behind it. And so I did 27 years. I got every right by most standards to be upset with the system and to be upset with myself. Just because I want to change the system don't mean I'm upset with it. I'm upset that the fact is that the people that are involved in it don't want to have the conversations that we're having now, because this is the only way we're going to fix anything. If you look at the two women that I'm looking at across from this table right now and can only see the person who committed a crime attached to them, there's something wrong with that system. Neither one of these ladies did anything except for love somebody who had committed a crime in the past and was convicted of it. Because I got news for you. There are plenty of them that are housing these individuals that have committed crimes, and some of them commit them on a daily basis. So let's not forget that part of it is the only difference between us a lot of times is that it's been documented that we did what we did, and we've been asked to come and do something about it. And then there are people like myself, and there are people like Laquan who do something with it and go out there and make something positive of it. This is the key with this, is these women across from me, these beautiful women across from me have turned this into something powerful, and they share it with other people in their own way, shape, or form. Because I can see it in both of them. They understand that people are people. And some days you're going to feel like smacking the shit out of somebody, and some days you're going to feel like hugging somebody. And both of those things are real. And it might be the same person. I might do both with them.
Right.
In the same day. Yeah. That's okay. So if I would go anywhere with my advice in this situation, it would be grace. Give yourself some grace to be human, and give other people some grace to be human too. That doesn't mean that you ever allow yourself to be a doormat. Doesn't mean you ever allow yourself to be abused in a situation, but give people grace, and give yourself grace.
Well, that is all the questions that I have for you guys. Thank you so much for being a part of this and sharing your story.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Conversations About a Brighter Way, Reentry Through Relationship, and spending some time getting to know a little bit about other humans.
We'd like to thank some people that helped to make Conversations About a Brighter Way possible. We'd like to thank our volunteer podcast editor, Patrick Domingo. You heard him in season 1 as well. Patrick is a multidisciplined artist based in Arizona. For contact information and to view their work, visit their website, patrickdomingojr.com. The beautiful music you hear in the intro and thank yous was written and performed by Chelsea-based singer-songwriter Annie Capps. If you're looking for a rootsy vibe, a touch of twang, and a soulful groove, look no further. You can find her at anniecaps.com. We'd like to thank Grove Studios for the discount for our podcast, our individual donors, United Way of Washtenaw County, the Ann Arbor Thrift, Nation Outside, Ann Arbor Area Community Foundation, our volunteers, mentors, and mentees. The contact information for A Brighter Way is info@abrighterway.org and 734-896-3770.
Oh, and wait. Subscribe and follow us on social media so you don't miss out on a single episode. And visit the website abrighterway.org for donation opportunities. And if you want to reach out to ask questions or send comments, you can email volunteering@abrighterway.org. This is Robin.
And this is Adam.
Peace out.